I would like to see some reference to environmental sustainability and social procurement kind of thing. There's no mention of that. That's pretty standard fare and some of the policies I looked into. On one end, there's covered in with social procurement, like tons of stuff, and on the other end, it's maybe just a line item. I think in this day and age, we should be aware, and that should be a factor for purchasing decisions. Of, are we hiring the guy with the coal fire, the fire power washer, or the clean one? I can't think of too many real specifics right now, but in this day and age, I think we should pay a little bit of attention to that. That's my one sort of glaring omission looking at other purchasing policies.
I would say that actually was a flag for me too, because I was looking at just where people come from, and I thought, okay, in today's day and age, if we're talking about environment sustainable, if you relocate an outfit from Victoria to this area of the island, you form a contract, or you hire somebody within your regional district. But some of one of the line items is it's based on price plus 10%, like it's fixed. Now, is that realistic in today's day and age? Maybe Victoria can do it for less, but what's the footprint? And what if it's 11%? Does it still go to Victoria side? So I think you're right on that. I agree. Henry?
I wanted to see some sort of safety reference because I did go through the municipal core audit last night. Of course, I'm familiar with the forestry safe certification, which is the same, gets you the same core cert. And we used to actually have to have a line in there specifically in policy. When I went through the audit last night, I didn't see that, but I saw 3 or 4 questions that you would get points for if there was a line in there that had safety being considered as a part of the principles for purchasing. So that could kind of fit in with your sustainability. You could get really cheap high-vis t-shirts that are made in China, but they're actually flammable. And because you're not welding, maybe you're not considering the flammability of them, but those sorts of things. And plus, when you buy a new piece of equipment, like when we were buying a wood chipper, from a safety perspective, you want to make sure that that particular wood chipper has the guarding, like there's all those considerations that have to go along with the purchasing. So I was going to get you a line and I forgot to grab it before I left work, but same sort of thing. I don't think it needs to be a huge big component, because I think that when mostly Julian is doing his purchasing, that would be a consideration that he would get a bit more granular with. But I think we do need to have a line in there, even if it's just under that compliance with requirements and specifications, compliance with WorkSafe regulations, or consideration given to which WorkSafe regulations would be applicable. Something along those lines, because we are moving towards getting core certified, so we have to have those policies
in place. My other 2 bits was I would really like to see a purchasing policy and a tender policy. I think from my experience with policies, they should be 2 separate ones, because your purchasing you may update before your tender, or there may be outside influencers on the tender policy, and then you would just be updating the one or the other, not the whole thing. I don't know, maybe municipally, maybe there's a reason why that should stay together. And my other point was under H, emergency. I'm really not comfortable with it just being the CAO having the authority to bypass normal procedure as outlined. I think that puts whoever's in the CAO position into a target. I think it leaves them open, and I don't see why, even in an emergency, it couldn't be mayor or deputy, CAO and mayor or deputy. I think that even in an emergency, you'd be able to get a hold of one or the other, and then it's not, you would never be in a spot where somebody would be questioning what the CAO did, that they've done it in isolation. I think for the CAO, that protection should be in there. And then there was just a couple of grammar things, but I think it was the points.
So I was just, wanted to know, so Anne Marie, you would get, some room for what you wanted. And then would you be able to do the same, or are you?
No, I'm suggesting staff.
Okay.
The other policies and
Could we pause for a second? I'm getting some feedback that the audio is not that good. Can we just do an audio test with our participants?
Check, check, check. Actually, we are speaking rather soft.
The new microphone is right there in front of Anne Marie, so that should hopefully be kicking things up.
Oh, you know why you're having an echo? It's because you've got both of those, remember? We were playing around earlier, I bet you,
Try that.
that's what's happening.
Okay, let's try that. Is that better?
I certainly understood that question, but generally speaking, the audio is not very good.
How is it? How are you hearing us now?
Say that again, Shelley?
There you go. So Ryan, I was in another room earlier on my phone, and I could hear clearly. Do you have earphones on? I can't see you, so just wondering, we're trying to figure out, is the volume up all the way on your computer? Oh, you got earphones on, okay.
I've got earphones on and my volume is in control. I don't have it right maxed, but certainly I have it. You know, I've tried all the volume levels.
Okay, because we've got on the speaker, it's as loud as it can go, right? Or is
Yeah, it's not that. It's that it's not properly mic'd, and if you don't mic it properly, it doesn't pick it up clearly. It's just the way it is. It's being mic'd far too far away from the speakers, and by the time it bounces around the room and gets to me, it's difficult. I don't know what you did just now, but maybe that'll help.
Yeah, we just changed the microphone. It wasn't set up properly in Zoom. It was set up differently on the computer, but not on Zoom. So I changed the microphone to one in the center of the room. So hopefully that will that will work better.
It appears to be a little bit better now. Yes.
Okay, great. We'll try to speak more loudly as well.
For clarity, Ryan, is it, are we distorted or is it that you can't hear us, the volume?
It's the distortion.
Distortion.
Okay.
It's kind of muffled, and then there's a very large echo. And that echo doesn't go away with the new mic. But it's not as muffled as it was. It's, or garbled, I guess would be the better way of putting it. So let's give it a shot.
Okay, great. So what I have here, and Claudia, are you taking notes regarding sustainable and environmental social procurement reference and the safety reference from Anne Marie?
Can I ask you what page you're working on right now?
We're actually not working off a page. What we've done is I've opened up the floor for comments and just a general comments from each counselor as to areas in policy that they saw needing addressing.
We're talking about the purchasing policy?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So I just want a clarification from Derek. So do you want an entire like social procurement policy or separate, or just, because you were mentioning social procurement, so that's a whole other.
in a perfect world, yes, but if this is close, then just some wording, I think. And you're like not, I'm suggesting, I don't know if the rest of council is in favor of adding an environmental and social sort of sustainability. I don't know if we'll go social procurement per se, but if there's wording along those lines, like I'm hoping it's just more than one line saying, we'll respect the environment or consider the environmental considerations.
Any response? I mean, this is one perspective. Are we in a, each one of us has our own. So go ahead, Ryan.
I think that the one thing that should be on the first page preferably at the very first item, is every purchase should be tagged and tied to a current need of the citizens of Port McNeil. There's maybe a different way to write that, but often things are approved that possibly could become unnecessary 7 months down the road. But according to this budget, it can be, the money can be spent because it was approved in the capital budget or the operating budget. When it becomes unnecessary, we need to have the means of removing that. And I guess the other main thing that I see is in the bidding process that we currently have, we give the supplier our budget maximum before we ask them to bid. And doing that, giving them that information prior to the beginning of the bidding process is contrary to the public interest, and it needs to be changed. Whatever we need to do to change it, we have the authority to do that, because our first role is to act in the public interest. And giving somebody your top dollar you're willing to spend before you start that process certainly is not in the interest of the people that are paying the bill.
I'll just speak to that under D 1.0A, I believe is what you're referring to, and it's referenced throughout after that. I'll read it in entirety. It says purchase is up to $5,000 if items are included in the approved annual operating budget and the quoted amount is the same or lower than the budgeted amount. And I had circled that last part, and I think it personally should be struck from there, because if it's in the operating budget, that's all it has to, that's all we need to know. We've either approved it, but saying it has to be the same amount, I think invites tenders to go right to that max, which is what you're referring to. But, sorry, is the intent of this isn't for the bidder, it's for staff, correct? That staff doesn't go over and above. Question to the CAO through the chair, please, right? Yeah, it's for the staff, right? This isn't for the people that are bidding on this.
That's correct.
So I think the intent of that wording is for staff to know that they can only go lower or to the budgeted amount. And if it goes over the budget amount, you would have to seek council approval, right? This is still a public document, though. Yeah. The other question I had for you, Ryan, was about if it was deemed no longer necessary, the item for purchase. So how would you suggest the wording so that staff doesn't always second guess each purchase, wondering if it's still relevant or not?
I guess to me, every purchase should be measured against taxpayer need. Is there still a taxpayer need for this budget item? That, to me, that's just a nice simple rule. It doesn't require a whole lot of changes. It just becomes the premise of every dollar that you spend.
Sorry, so just for clarification, I'm not sure what you're wanting to know with that. So is that you want to, before every purchase is made, have it come back to council?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Just having that as a principle, which is really what that first page is all about. It's just sort of the principles of how and why we do things, or the second page, wherever it was.
Okay.
So
like, are you thinking like a line that says consideration given to, it's where? So Claudia feels that that issue is addressed in our purpose statement. So,
but it needs to be, in my view, it needs to be the first thing you look at when you're purchasing. Do I really need this? The same thing we should do at home when we buy things. And that needs to be there, because it's a very important thing.
what I hear you saying is that you want it more specific, because right now it says that our procurement processes are characterized by a high standard of professionalism and integrity in the management of public resources entrusted to it. So that's the clause in there, the statement, the 4 or 5 words that says it has to be in our best interests. What you're saying is you'd like something a little bit more specific and precise.
The purpose of the policy
Yeah.
should be to get the best value for the taxpayer, and that doesn't say that anywhere. So I guess it does says obtains the best value for its expenditures, but if you don't need to spend it, I think, so the benefit to the taxpayer needs to be in there in my view, but I mean, I'm just one, so I don't want to belabor it too much. I just think it's really important that that's there. Huh?
Okay, thank you. I've noted it. Okay, Derek.
To your point, Ryan, you know, I feel the trust in the management and the people in charge of these purchases to act in the best interest of our community. So I think the purpose statement is sort of fine the way it is. On that particular subject, and I did want to speak to the environmental, there's an example of a policy here from the Comox Valley Regional District.
So we've gone around the table more in a general fashion. Gabby, did you have something you wanted to throw in there?
Just that I feel that it's captured in the purpose statement, Ryan's and what he wants intent, I think it's in there already.
I agree with that.
Okay, you're voted out. You're voted down there, Ryan. Derek, would you like to speak to the environment?
Sure. I just pulled this from the Comox Valley Regional District. When evaluating environmental responsibly in the CRBD procurements, points may be awarded where proponents minimize environmental harm, including end-of-life impacts, maximize resource efficiency, reduce energy and water consumption, and minimize waste, minimize carbon emissions. Those are really 3 points that sort of speak to what I was concerned about. And I am concerned about sort of origin of goods. I'm not sure if that's really covered in here, whether we're in something in China or down the road, but it could be rolled in depending on how you look at it, like end-of-life impacts, minimizing environmental harm. So really those clauses could take origin of goods into consideration. And then there's another bullet about social value. It's not very long, so I'll read that too. When considering social value, points may be awarded where proponents maximize employment, training, and apprenticeship opportunities among local disadvantaged, equity-seeking, or marginalized individuals or populations, maximize the diversification of the supply chain by including nonprofit organizations, social enterprises, and small, medium enterprises, contribute to the strengthening of the community by supporting social goals and objectives of the CRBD, including any corporate social responsibility initiatives undertaken by an organization contributing to social well-being. So that's a little more wordy than the environmental one, but I hope we can touch on that. Okay.
Is council okay with passing that information on to staff and having them wordsmith something, or do we want to hash something out here?
I'm okay with the first part. I think the second part really opens the social procurement discussion up a lot wider. I'm not saying we couldn't go there, but I think that is a much bigger discussion. So the first part, absolutely. The second part, I would be hesitant only because we haven't really had that discussion yet around the council table, and I think it's going to take a bit. That's my
Maybe
thought.
something a little more watered down, or a little more less specific. Because
For that part, yeah.
You know, there's an advantage, just some good points made in that section.
Anne Marie? I'm just chewing my head around. I think that the principles should be short and sweet. And that was saying about scoring, which to me would go more into the tender part of, but then I don't know if that goes into the tender policy, or if there's actually a policy and then there's the actual procedure that goes with the policy, which it almost sounded to me like if you're actually scoring, that would be in the procedure. But that's how I would structure it. So I don't know how our policies and procedures are structured, because your policy governs how you do it, but then your procedure actually would be your forms and your format and your nitty gritty of how you award the points and that sort of thing.
Yes.
I think the reality is when you're kind of looking at a broader scope, let me put it that way, because when you're actually doing a tender, that's going to be in there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna be looking at, so if we look at, let's just take the harbor, for example, we're gonna do something at the harbor. Then you're gonna take the concerns that you're gonna have to deal with that particular project, right? So the environmental concerns and those kind of things. So you can certainly have environmental and sustainability within the purchasing policy, but I think you're going almost too deep somewhere, because when you're looking at doing a tender, that's when you're gonna have to bring forward what kind of quality, what specifications you're looking for, which it speaks of. So this is kind of, it's a policy for staff to follow. And when you get into the broader scope of larger projects or major purchases, that's kind of almost, you follow this and you want to follow with Northwest Partnership Trade Agreement. But yeah, it's almost kind of too
It varies too much? Is that what
yeah,
you're
it
saying?
varies too much. So we're trying to put into this policy, and and I have no problem with the environmental aspect of it for sure. But I think when you get into the deeper aspect of that environmental, it needs to be in the tender, not necessarily in this purchasing policy.
I think maybe you're focusing on the word environmental.
Well-
Because there's pouring gas into a stream, and then there's, like Shelley said, a company coming up from Victoria. And their environmental impacts when they come up and they tent, because that's how they're gonna accommodate their workers. I don't know, maybe we've all got such different, because there's the environmental, as in they're not gonna harm, like they're said, using the coal-fired generator instead of the whatever's more solar powered one. There's that, yeah, there's that environmental. But
Yeah, and in the safety part of it too, I think, you can certainly have those lines in here, but we have to follow workers' compensation.
it doesn't say you have to follow workers' compensation.
Well,
And when you-
that's given. I can't,
No,
you can have it in there, it's fine. But I think the other thing that we have to look, our council needs to consider is these policies are supposed to be written in layman's terms. They're supposed to be easy for everybody to understand. And when we start to try to get a little bit too much information, then we end up being, we want everybody to be able to read this, such as the people that work here and anybody else, to say, yeah, this makes sense. This is, I've seen too many policies where they're written in language that, it's hard for staff to know what they're supposed to do. It's not in what we consider layman's terms, but that's all.
You guys can bear with me, I have notes to throughout this document. Probably if you could just work through it with me. But under the principles, just starting right off the bat, we have a number of items listed there. They're ranked A to H. I'm guessing that doesn't imply priority. That's just simply a choice of ranking. Because if it did, price would probably be at the bottom for me, not number 2 on the list. Under F, we've got character, integrity, business reputation, judgment, experience, efficiency. So that's a bit of a word salad there. We've got integrity and business reputation. Those are sort of one and the same. And the other question that I have is who makes that decision? You can have 2 employees and they'll each have a different answer because of their perspectives. So if we're going to, I think we just need to simplify it. The integrity and the experience and efficiency of the supplier, just simplify it. Don't leave it so wordy, I guess. Over on 2.0 A, we require a town of Fort McNeil business license. But if they operate under B, which is within the regional district of Mount Waddington, there's no reference to a business license requirement
And I say that because we could have a company from Port Hardy, should they not be required to produce a business license. And we'll have that discussion later when we come to the business license. But my understanding of the business license is that it provides towns the opportunity to consider and weigh the integrity of the business that's coming to operate within your boundaries. It also informs that you have this business operating there. So I wondered why no business license was required for businesses working within the regional district. It doesn't have to be a business license with us, but it could be with the community that they're linked to, wherever that is. So,
Before you go on to that, can I get clarification, because I know when I owned a business, I had a business license here, but any community that I did business in, I had to buy a business license. So even if they're Situate, I think, and I want to know from staff, is it the intent that you're just including the regional district in the town of Port McNeill in preference, they would still need a business license? Correct. Yeah.
In the regional district, they don't give out business licenses,
But they would still need to purchase one.
but they have to purchase one here. So if you have, right now, as we have it, if a contractor comes into town and is working on somebody's house, let's say, and they live up, or their business is run, but they're coming in here, they need to get a business license to be able to contract out. Absolutely. That's hard.
that's not how I read that, but I guess that's in the other policy then.
Yeah, but this is to say that, well, I guess what we're trying to do is, because I believe Kite Creek is not in our area, is that correct?
Regional district.
Right, so we're saying, yeah, we're looking at the local community plus in the outer regions here, which we consider, they consider part of being as part of Port McNeill wanting to do business there. But yes, they have to come and get a business license, but that's part of your business policy.
So then I guess that just speaks to why is it referenced in A but not B? If it's part of the policy, then why do we have to, like if that's the expectation for businesses operating, why list it in A? It should be listed in both.
Madam Chair, if I could speak to that. Again, being a policy more for the employees than the contractors, it's to ensure when Public Works is going to, and we just had this happen, they went to go and get some repairs on their vehicle. The company that they went to didn't have a current business license in the town of Port McNeill, so we're making it incumbent on our employees to ensure that the people that they are dealing with have a business license.
Yeah.
More so than
I think what Shirley's saying though is that it's mentioned, business license is mentioned in the top one, but not at the bottom one, so.
I think that would just be a simple addition of.
Or strike the, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I'm saying is it should be on both if it's important. On the next page under D, purchasing authority. So 1A and 2A both have the phrases and the quoted amount is the same or lower than the budget amount. And my notes, this speaks to what you had mentioned, Ryan, the budget approves this. Do we really need to have, and we also require that our staff get approval if they go over the budget. So do we need to have that statement in there? Because I think as Ryan has said, you know, this policy is open to the public, and as is our budget. And our whole process, they can witness our whole discussions and know what we've set aside for what piece of equipment. And that sets the line for where the bidding can go if they choose to. So I personally would strike those statements out. Under E, 1C, it says here supplier accounts are paid by invoice. It goes further to say, and this next section that I read, I would strike. If statements issued by the supplier, all invoices will be cross-checked to the statement to ensure all documents are received. This is the role of your accounts payable person. If we need to specify somebody how to do their job, you know, this is a bit of, I call this micromanaging. That's the role of the accounts payable department to make sure. And that's, you know, part of that responsibility. And the reason I would strike this is I find this is a very lengthy document. If you want people to read it, make it easy to read. So that's my thought. So I would strike that, you know, how to utilize a statement. If you're an accounts payable person, you already know that. And under F5, it says prior to the issuance of a tender or proposal, the CFO or designate will review all documents to ensure that funding is available for the project. In addition, the CAO or designate will ensure that the proposed methodology for evaluating the tender or proposal is clear and consistent with town's practices. So practices can be best practices, or do we want it consistent with policy? To me, the word practices opens it up a little bit to discretion and a bit of a hole there. Ryan, are you okay if I just go through this first? I got a list.
So you're muted, Ryan.
I can't hear you, you're muted.
What page are you working on?
5,
Okay, thank you.
page 7 of the document of the agenda. And then under F6, it references sufficient time must be allowed for the preparation and return of tenders or proposals prior to the date of closing. And my question to staff is, who determines this? How is it defined? Following page E, I have notes everywhere here. It states all staff who may be involved with receipt of tenders are to be notified of the required procedures to ensure tenders are not inadvertently opened or delivered to incorrect locations. I read that and I wonder if it's not better to have a statement that says all, just blanket and simplify, all tenders will be dated and signed by the recipient and given to the CFO or CAO, period. Because the way this is worded is, you know, all staff who may be involved with it are to be notified of the correct procedures to ensure, and it reads as though, oh, there's a package coming in, what should I do with it? What should I do with it? Whereas they could go to the doc and say, oh, an agenda's come in, or packages come in, this is what I do with it. It's wrote, it's specified. I sign it, I date it, and I put it on the CAO's desk, or I lock it in his cabinet, whatever the case may be. I just think that if this is to be practical, let's be concise in our directions. Under 2.A, any revisions to a tender must be submitted in writing prior to the time of receipt of tender. And I wonder, do you mean the closing of the tender? It says receipt of tender. It should be the closing. Yeah, just change the wording there. And then under B, I'll go with that one after. Under 3A, tender openings shall at all times be formal, correct, and well documented. 2 staff members should be in the minimum in attendance together with the consultant if one is used. And my only note there is to be careful. A consultant may not always need to be present at the opening. If we specify that the consultant must be there, we're adding a cost to a project that may or may not be warranted. So if there was some discretion around that, perhaps.
How about the word needed instead of used at the end? Because it doesn't sort of imply that if we brought a consultant off of the harbor and he's out here in the tenders, we're not following policy, but staff could say, well, that's not needed.
Yeah.
Even though we're using a consultant.
Yep. So strike 1 is used, we'll strike if needed. Under 3B, tender opening record shall be prepared suitable to include the following information. And you guys, I'm really sorry, this is really nitpicking, but space for the names, couldn't we just put names and signatures, names of all people, official closing, names of each bidder? And this comes back to this micromanaging. Do we have to say, put a space for the name? It's, and then I'm just, I like this policy. I like that it provides the direction. I'm just saying, just for clarity, I want people to read this document and the better, more concise, the more opportunity. And then C says the town staff will ensure accuracy and ensure the tenders are not opened prematurely.
Is that a problem?
Well,
Like,
that's
I
what
think-
I have seen it.
Yeah, just the document reads, the tenders that I've been involved in, it's very formal. I mean, they go in, it's up until this time, you go, they get knifed open, they do the list, it's done. And that is the bid opening time, is what's advertised. It's not so much a closing date, it's the bid opening time. Your bid has to be there before, and kind of all through the document, it seems like there's all these things getting said about tenders being opened. Why? If there's a tender opening time, why is there all this consideration about,
Maybe he can speak to that, because he's been involved in a couple that have problems, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Not every staff member is trained to that level. You have a new employee coming on in a management position. They may not know that this is the procedure, this is how we do tenders. So if we have it in a policy, in a document, that's something, this is a training point for them, is, you know, when you get a tender a week early, than anybody else, you don't just knife it open and have a look at it. You put it in, you know.
that would be in their job date break, or their work procedures, wouldn't it? If you're receiving tender.
No.
Not usually, it's
Well,
gonna be in the. Well,
Sorry, I'm sitting on my hand.
I'm gonna agree with you on this one here, Anne Marie. This is babysitting people. This statement should just be simple, you know, the town will follow guidelines for opening documents, or all employees are expected to adhere to the tender guidelines.
I think you've got like tender receipt would be one of your points, and then the next one is the opening of the tender, which would be two members, the appropriate, I would actually put the form name, because you could update the form without having to change the policy. And this is how it goes through, you know, it'll go from left to right. But the receipt of a tender is like what Shelley said. When a tender comes in, it's signed, it's date stamped. I mean, I would typically ask for a photograph of the name, like the initials and the time and date stamp, so that I can go back to my boss and prove that it was there on time. So that's the receipt, and then literally it goes from the front counter to the lockbox safe or whatever. That to me is all that should be there under receipt of tenders. And then your opening of the tender happens at the time that was advertised. 2 members and or consultant, they're opened, it doesn't say here, are they opened in the order that they were received? Or is it just random? Like, I mean, if you go to the MOF, they're literally opened in the order that they're received. That's how Angela organizes them. And that's the procedure. It happens every time the same way. She trained Amanda to do it. It's the same thing. This is the way that we do it.
I kind of agree. I think that I almost think this could be struck, because if we're adhering to a policy that they come in, they're initialed and signed, and if we want, the signature could be across the seal. The staff would sign across the seal, and then it's locked, and you know. Go ahead, Derek.
I tend to agree, we don't want to babysit, but I think all these clauses should stay in here for the purpose of the people putting the tenders out. And they have confidence that we're not going to open those soon. If we got some new staff that aren't trained, then they're going to see 1E and, oh, I can't open this, or B. So I just don't want to lose sight that this is a public document, and you know, if it's loosey-goosey on when the tenders are getting opened, or, you know, that leaves some concerns to people who are bidding.
the other statement within there, the town staff will ensure accuracy of what? I think really what you're trying to say is ensure that tenders are not open prematurely. Strike ensure accuracy.
Your documentation, maybe? Is
Ensure
that what they're getting
tenders-
at with accuracy?
Like it doesn't
I don't know.
actually, it doesn't actually say in here that the tenders have to come in a sealed envelope.
Yeah, that's
I think somewhere,
G, accepted sealed bids, establishing sealed bids shall adhere to all procedures. Original bids must be received in a sealed envelope, so that's G1 maybe.
over on the following page under F, we have, it says after each tender is opened, recorded, and initial checks have been made, it is to be carefully replaced with its envelope. So the use of the word carefully is there. Down on 4A, tenders that were opened are to be carefully analyzed for compliance. And I would say that with this use of the word carefully, if we have to tell our staff to do their job carefully, we should consider who we have doing the job. So I would strike those words out of there. Again, for me, it's just making this more concise so people will read it. Under the emergency, I also had noted that I would like to see a duty to inform mayor and council, or a duty to consult. And that is for the protection of the CAO and also for mayor and council, so that, you know, if we know things happen fast, that if a CBC reporter calls the mayor and they're caught unawares, it just would be nice to be informed. And there may be other information.
So I missed where you-
H1,
Okay.
emergency.
Right.
I do agree with that. I don't know if we can maybe check that with the list right now, but
We're all in agreement, so some language around that.
I am too, because I see it's not to, you know, second guess the CAO, it's for his or her protection, where, you know.
Yeah. So those are all my comments. I'm sorry, I'm not, I do appreciate the work that's been done. I just, Ryan, you have something to add?
The only thing I guess I see is that at the end of the day, when a $500,000 contract goes out, I think the council should have some oversight in that process, and it should be written in the policy. Just passing a budget in January and then, or, you know, whenever we pass it in May, and then spending it in December, perhaps if it's a big number, we should have a little bit of input, both to the specifications. I think about the swimming pool. I think about the marina. We're spending close to $1 million between the two of them this year, and just passing it in the budget with almost no information. I think we need to have some knowledge of what the final product is going to look like before we say go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Gabby.
So my comment to that would be that these policies are set in place for not just our council, but future council whose composition may be made up of different strengths, and therefore you want to protect going forward. So though some of us on council may feel that we have strengths in certain areas, and I don't know, I would be hesitant with that. Because I think that, again, to go back to Shelley's point about micromanaging staff or who we have in those positions, we need to trust that Julian, if he doesn't have the expertise, will go to the needed people, and that will be part of the budget process to give them what they need, unless you're talking about something else.
I'm talking about having, taking responsibility for spending taxpayers' dollars falls on the members of council at the end of the day, not the staff. And we need to, I believe, have a look at these things and say, yeah, that's still good to go. Or, hey, has this process been followed adequately? Because where's the oversight? If that was an employee working for my company spending $500,000, I might want to stick my nose in from time to time to see how it's going. And it doesn't sound like this document is going to give me, as the owner of this company, representing the owners of this company, the citizens of Port McNeill, the opportunity to put my oar in the water and have a look and see what's going on. And I think we need to be able to do that because we haven't been given enough information at the beginning. For example, with the marina, what do we know what the plans are to do with the marina? How do we know that those are even what we want? There's been no recommendations come out of the Harbor Advisory Committee how to spend $600,000. There's been no clear plan handed to council to say, this is what we're going to do. So I think before we approve that $600,000 expenditure, we need to have a look at what's going on because we're the ones that are accountable to the taxpayers.
So what you're referring to, Ryan, is the request for proposals that would go out, and council has generally been informed before those go out for tender. So we are informed ahead of the process. And then on this purchasing document would be our agenda, page number 9, under 5, it says awarding of a tender or proposal. It says a report will be made by the CAO, will be included on the next appropriate council agenda, and the report will make a recommendation to the preferred vendor. And that's where council is informed of the decision of staff, and we ratify it or we don't. We either accept the recommendation or we don't. So that's the check and balance that we have. We either move ahead with it or we choose a different path. Eric?
Thank you. Councilor Downey is just making the point that I'm making. I think, we approve a budget ahead of time. Staff's really good at all contracts across our desks, so I think we have enough checks and balances in this document right now.
If there's nothing else, I'm cognizant of time. Are we okay to move off of this one?
I guess just some of my concerns with
Okay.
some things we all said yes, change, and other things you just
Yeah.
said your concern and we didn't.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we can either come back to it or
No, let's just get it one and done.
okay. So I think
Go ahead.
I think it was just more to go through your list again quickly. You made your points and we're either yes, no, remove. Did we all agree to remove the space? 5 times or not? That seems like a good thing to me, but we didn't all say, hey, let's do that. So.
Okay, under A1F, just cleaning up the less wordy. Simplify it to integrity, experience, and efficiency, or just simplifying it. Because some of the words are repetitive.
I'm okay.
Do that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
2B, the addition of a statement regarding a business license requirement.
Or omit the other one with the assumption.
Or
that
omit the
everybody
other
knows.
one.
For the purposes of this policy, a local supplier shall be defined in the order of preference as follows. A business situated within the town of Port McNeill municipal boundaries, period. And, well, it shouldn't be and because it's the order of preference, a business situated within the regional district of Mount Waddington. Because if you're not a full, if you do the business check, I would assume the first thing you're going to check is that they have a business license, they have a WorkSafe number, because that would be in the procedure of how you verify a business. Right? So the policy says our local supplier shall be defined in the order of preference as follows. A business situated within the town of Port McNeill municipal boundaries, a business situated within the regional district of Mount Waddington, period.
I disagree with that. I think the word business license needs to be in there expressly said that you need a business license. So just adding you need a town of Port McNeill business license to be would also be a lot more clear to me. Because for the layman reading this, I need a business license.
Well, then you're not a business. You don't have a business license.
So why
you're
would we
not a
not be
business.
clear from the outset that you need a business license to?
We do
for
have
us to-
businesses operating in our boundary without license. Business license.
Okay,
And somebody from High Creek doesn't want to get a business license, then they're
but
not-
it doesn't say in here that if you get the tender and you're not from, if you get the tender and you don't have a
This
Port
isn't,
McPhee
this
license,
isn't
you
about
need to have
tendering.
it.
This isn't about tendering, this
Well,
is purchasing.
even for
period.
supplying,
I
like
could be, if
I'm
you,
lost.
you could go to one of our department stores here in town, and they may or may not have a business license. And so if you're choosing between them, you're gonna pick the one that has a business license or the one that doesn't. That's how I understand that.
So is this is on, so just for clarification here, if this is purchasing, this is different than if a roofer that lives in High Creek comes into town, they need to get a business license. If somebody has a shop in High Creek, they don't need a business license. If we go to them, they don't need a business license. So I guess what I'm hearing are two different things. So if this is for the purchase of purchasing some supplies and a shop is in High Creek, then they don't need a business license because regional district. But if they are a contractor, like a roofer who lives in High Creek and comes into town to do a roof, they need a business license. So it's actually two different things.
So it's goods versus services.
Goods versus services, right? So I think if it's goods, you can go the full stop and add a C that says, in all cases, and just do actually leave it the way it is, because one will have a business license and one won't. But if it's, what was it, supplier, and what was the two issues?
Supply, goods or services.
So, and if you're talking services, then you could do A, B, and then add a C in all cases. A valid business permit, business license must be had.
Because where does if you're contracting a service, is that under this purchasing agreement, or do we actually have a policy that refers to how you contract a service? Because if you're contracting a service, you're looking for WCB, you're looking for GST, you're looking for whether they're a limited company or not. Like, where does all that? Is that already somewhere else?
Or is that not what you raised? That's the point you raised earlier about safety. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
This would be, all right, so I'm just gonna throw this out because it might not be applicable, you might not have this, but let's say, you have heavy duty, or you have something that needs to be fixed and the person's in High Creek, right? And they're gonna fix, like, it's whatever we have, we go there, right? But you have that same, maybe there's the same one that's in Port Hardy, right? Far away, right? So are we going to pick the one that's, it's the idea is to be within a certain circumference or a regional district. So those people might not, as Rich said, they might not have a business license here, within the town of Port McNeill. But I do think that we have to specify that they need to have a business license in Port McNeill. Like if we're going to, because we have had where I talked to Julian and said, this supplier that you're going to, that you're buying from regularly, that we spend, maybe $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month on supplies, doesn't have a business license. And they think that's okay. And I said, so you can't, you're gonna have to tell them that they need to have a business license or you can't shop there.
But what I guess the question is there a difference between goods that you purchase from a store that is in Mount Washington but not located in Worthington and services?
Well, the idea of services is you're all talking dollars and cents here too, because it depends on the value you're looking at, right? So we all know as things are more, as we, that the larger the expenditure, then you're needing to get quotes or different information in, and so proposals, whatever we're looking at. So if they're, like I'm sure McLeany doesn't have a business license for McNeill, but there are consultant engineer firm. Is that correct? I'm sure, I don't think they do.
I'm not sure if they do that, so yeah, you brought up a good point.
Yeah, so I'm
So
not
my
sure.
understanding is they would, they should.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
but
my
I'll look
understanding as
into that, but I don't think they do.
No. Keep track.
Because, so, yeah, it's, anyways, I'm trying to get it. I have no problem with putting the added word, you know, if this is a situation, but the idea is, we can even take that out, to say it's gonna be for the town. Because,
The elephant in the room is this policy, for the purposes of policy, a local supplier shall be defined. It does not say anywhere in here, local supplier anywhere. So is it a moot point, or do we need to add local
But again,
supplier in here
Is
somewhere?
that in the procedure? That's where I'm getting
Is it
lost.
correct me if I'm wrong?
It's
or-
under principles H. Preference will be given to local suppliers where material services are equal, but the cost does not exceed 10%.
Okay, I apologize for that.
We're just
Or,
kind
yeah,
of
I just want
defining-
somebody to have a business license.
so we're defining what a local supplier is, so it's,
And really, it should say, like, Port Hardy should be included in there.
Port Hardy's not in the
Other
RD?
day.
Port Hardy's not in the RD?
No,
Yeah,
we're
they
not.
are. Yeah,
They
yeah, they are.
I just threw that out there too.
Yeah,
So I-
okay.
Yeah, no, but
That just means the broader community.
I just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the broader community.
You know, Claudia, after the boat license fiasco, we need to drill into that. My understanding, the regional district of Mount Waddington is kind of like Cape Scott to
It's very large.
Wass.
Yeah.
So we're saying locally, first priority is given to somebody within Port McNeil, second priority is given to anybody from Wass to Full Harbor, which in the supply of services could be a big deal, not so much supply of goods, because, you know, IGA only carries what IGA carries, and ShopRite only carries what ShopRite carries. And then you're going outside of Mount Waddington, and that's what I'm.
But are you gonna ask for a business license, a local business license from them when you're actually going to get the service done? That's
Yeah,
often the case. I
That's
don't-
what we're asking.
Here's our caveat, it says preference will be given. So what we're talking about there is that we can include a requirement of business license for somebody operating within the RD. But I mean, the reality is if you need a heavy duty mechanic and you have two shops, one's in High Creek and one's in Port McNeil, but the Port McNeil guy is too busy to take you in, maybe High Creek doesn't have a business license, you would still go to him. The preference was Port McNeil, they can't meet the conditions, you go. So it doesn't mean that we can't use them, it just says the preference will be given.
So, and that's the order, yeah, that's what
So
we're
I
trying
think
to.
we could still I think we could still add the business license to B. But, or
Right,
we
so
could
if somebody
ask-
didn't have a business license, that would be C almost, whatever, right? Nobody with a business license.
Well, you don't need a C because
Yes, I
above
agree,
it
but-
says the preference
Yeah.
will be, that's your thing.
I think the other sort of, that's a reminder for the employees. The other
Yeah.
thing that we have to keep in mind, our business license bylaw says that you cannot do business within the town of Port McNeil without first obtaining a business license. So that's where our sort of our catch-all is almost wondering if we need to reference as per the Port McNeil business license bylaw.
Yeah.
That sounds not.
D1, the and quoted amount is the same or lower than the budget amount. I think it should be struck, but what is the group thing?
Sorry, which one was that?
D1A, sorry. Purchases up to 5,000 if items are included in the approved annual operating budget and the quoted amount is the same or lower than the budget amount. Because the premise is that staff are going to spend according to the budget and not, right, they have authorization. Managers know their budget.
I can just speak on that. I think it's just kind of reiterating to, because we've had some situations where staff, different departments have gone over, and it's kind of after the fact. So this is kind of just putting it in there that we have a budget amount, council has approved that budget amount, and it's okay to buy, maybe, we just had a situation where security cameras for the harbor is coming under budget. Yay, that's great, right? We're pleased, and the quality is there, everything is, the work is installed. But it's more to say to staff that, you're not gonna go over, and they have done that in the past. So, but, if it's, we want it for, and also it's the quoted amount. So in other words, they're going to get a quote, up to $5,000. The people come back later and say, well, yeah, it's this much. It's like, no, we won't accept that. We have to have it at the quoted amount you gave us or lower than the budget. It's just wording. I don't think it hurts anything. I mean, I think it's more clarification for staff.
I'm for leaving it as is.
Just out of curiosity, so when you're referencing all these things that have happened, they've all happened without a purchasing policy, correct? So it's almost kind of, you're punishing people before they've done anything, I think is kind of what you're getting at, right? Like they haven't had a policy. If you put too much extra into it before you, I can't read that.
I'm going to excuse myself from this meeting as it is too difficult to follow. That's from Ryan.
Ask him to call in, and we can put him on the phone.
Yeah,
Do you want me to? Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just text and take him. Oh, I think he's already gone.
I'll send a message. Keep going, Anne.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you haven't given them the rules and the policy to follow, and you're already putting in the problems.
You're
Does
trying
that
to
make
eliminate
sense?
the problems is what I see. I don't see
I know,
them
but you
putting in
haven't-
the problems. I think it's just saying you don't, I mean, you can take it out if you want. I mean, it's totally, it's counts, it's a policy after all.
I personally take it out because the way I read that is you can put that in there, it doesn't mean it still won't happen. It's not gonna, what they need to know is what the policy is. There was no policy before. There was nothing for them to reference. Whereas now I suspect this policy will go out to staff and they'll be sign off on it as acknowledgement that they know their responsibility if they're out there making purchases on our behalf. So my only concern is that I find this a very lengthy worded document, and I don't think you're gonna get any traction from people. It's gonna once over and on. So that's my concern.
Policies usually stay in the office, and then when somebody new comes in, they look at it, certainly they can read it, or they can take a copy. The majority of people that this is going to affect is the department managers.
Currently, we're working without a policy. I would rather see us have one slightly lengthy and, we could set a policy committee to really go through this and bring it back again next year, but, this is better than nothing, which we're currently operating with. That's my 2 cents.
Because we need a tiebreaker on for being D1 as is. Maybe Gabby, if you want to stay in.
I'm okay, I'm okay with leaving it.
In the interest of time, I can leave it in too. Like I said, where I'm coming from. It's just cleaning this up and we already know the time. So E1C, it's the reference to statements issued by suppliers. Can we strike that?
Yep, I'm okay with that.
Under F5, the latter part there says consistent with town practices. And my thought was to have reference policy or tender to tighten up the language rather than practices.
Policy and procedures, I think, as opposed to practices.
Sounds great.
Okay, that becomes policy and procedures.
Communication.
6, I had queried the sufficient time must be allowed and that there's no answer for that. I don't want, who determines it, how is it defined? So that may be just a question to be addressed later.
If I may, and doesn't necessarily need to be in there for me, because I've done so many tenders, RFPs, quotes, that as a manager that's issuing these, you need to give the proponent sufficient time to bring back, like I couldn't say, you know what, we're doing an OCP, I need to have your proposal in 3 days.
So, but again, let's strike that then.
We could, I just inherently know that I need to give them enough, how long is it going to take to prepare us an RFP for an OCP? It's gonna
So
take a
let's
month.
strike it then, if that's okay with council.
That to me should be coming up somewhere else, not here.
Yeah.
I'm okay with your other suggestion, under 3, space 4, just getting rid of that wording. I'm sorry, on page 8, 3.0B, you have space for name, space for name, space for official.
Oh, yeah.
I'm okay with,
Yeah.
simplifying that.
1E, all staff who may be involved in the receipt of tenders are to be notified of the required procedures to ensure tenders are not inadvertently opened or delivered to incorrect locations.
See, I'm for leaving that one, just one more step for staff to say, oh, new staff, you know, but
But again, if the intent of this document is for the managers, it's your front desk clerk that's gonna be the one that screws it up.
all the more reason should be there, and they should see the policy. No excuse.
In the interest of just getting something in place, and then I like Gabby's idea of actually looking at
See
a
how it
policy
works.
committee and looking at how things are set up so that it's easier for you guys to manage.
Well, I would say, see how it goes in a year, and if everybody's like, well, there's some problems,
Yeah.
then we, anyway.
Okay, so what I'm gonna say is within here, there is still actually no instruction as to what to do. Outside sealed date, so it says in 1B, upon receipt, immediately record date, time. On the outside, a sealed envelope showing date, time, receipt, and signed by the town recipient or designated staff. A list of tenders received shall be kept. Tenders received are to be kept in a secure place.
Then under 3E, it goes through the process. Page 8.
Okay, you guys are fine leaving it, go for it. 2B, I don't know if I've got this slide up, some things I skipped.
It was 2B or 2A we had, instead of at the time of receipt, it was the time of closing.
Time of closings.
It's needed for the 3A.
3A.
Yeah, so I've got that. Okay. 3C, the town will ensure accuracy and ensure the tenders are not open prematurely. Can we just say the town will ensure tenders are not open prematurely?
Documentation, maybe? Or is that covered?
Well, it's just that it had ensure accuracy, but accuracy of what? That's really fair.
Well, I think accuracy of the documentation of when it's received, stamped. But that's
Except
all.
it's a sealed envelope, you can't open it.
No, you can,
So-
would you put it on the outside?
Making sure that the time, yeah, the date and the time is correct, 'cause I believe that's.
But that is covered under
It is.
G1, so I'm okay with that.
On F was carefully, 3F had carefully, 4A had carefully, I would just say strike the words carefully out of there. And then 1 was the, however you want to word it, duty to inform mayor and council, or duty to consult, or some kind of language. Anne Marie had said.
Mayor or deputy, I think it's good.
Mayor,
Just get the mayors out of
Yeah.
town, right, and the deputies there for. Right, good idea.
On to the business license bylaw 491. And Derek, you had asked for this to come back to this meeting for some clarity around giving some direction to the APC.
Yes. I did send out a list of points to Pete, which I believe he sent to everyone. I don't know if you have them. In the interest of time, if we could go through them, or if everyone's okay with those points. I think I purposely made them pretty generic and try not to lead, you know, what we're after here, or after.
You know what, they weren't included in this package.
They were in an email though, but you want to
They
just,
were
how
in-
many are there? There.
It's like 5 or 6.
Comparison.
Sure. Comparison to other communities of fees in Schedule A. Comparison on the basis of fee in Schedule A. Comparison of all 5 definitions in Schedule A, not just mobile business, which sort of spurred this on. Perhaps additional definitions are warranted. Mobile business fee comparison for operating on private property. Comparison of mobile business fee for operating on public property. Examples, pros and cons of a region-wide business license. This is the idea of the regional district. Et cetera. Explore the idea and seek examples of short or one-term business licenses. This one's maybe a little more debatable. For individuals who do not fit the home-based occupation definition. And the thought is, just with COVID, outdoor vending, sort of whatever new world we're going into, maybe there's some new business models there where smaller scale businesses can take advantage. And this examples of models of business license fees, increases or otherwise going towards economic development initiatives. So my concern is some towns will raise the business license fee, but that money will go towards an economic development person, or maybe just go to general revenue. I think we should have a good idea of where that stuff's coming from.
I'm okay with your recommendations. Annie?
Yeah, I've got a couple here, but just one clarification on a business license on a private property. I think we need to let them know that we're talking about really 2 things. One would be a business that's coming to a private property owner, and then a private, or the owner who already has a business license wanting to extend onto their property, say, right? Isn't that what you're, because if somebody.
More mobile business, some towns have a policy which is, for example, has really high fees for going on public property. Like, so the town, we're allowing them to go to the harbor and the gravel parking lot and sell their stuff.
Okay.
Our policy currently is, if it's private property and zoned correctly,
Doesn't matter.
fly right at her. But I think they're apples, you know, why do we have such a high fee for one and then one's outlawed altogether?
So, and then all of that I had was, compare fees in like-minded communities, and I think you might have said it, any of them do prorated or seasonal business license rates.
I think we do a prorated thing, do we not, or half a year?
Half year.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that
that's
isn't
if somebody comes in though,
Partly.
partway through the year. So I'm asking if somebody,
short-term or
sure,
prorated.
like I'm thinking of one person in particular, like a food, produce would only come during growing season. And so, you know, and they will only come maybe for 4 months.
So maybe we could say a prorated or short-term business license.
Something like that. Just see if other communities have it. I don't necessarily want it developed just the way other communities do them or not. Was there anything else?
Yes, Pete?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Cole's, specifically on the mobile business. Would you like the APC to look at extending it out of private properties into public?
I think so. We need examples of what other communities are doing, and some allow it on public property and some don't. And that would be a decision for us to grapple with.
Do we not? Like, I thought I had somewhere that it would have to come to public. Like, it'd have to come to council for approval if it was on, I could have read that completely wrong. So, okay.
No, as it stands now, it's just not happening on public property. The way it's
Well,
all
it
worded
is the
is.
farmer's market, is on public property, and they did
We
seek
do.
permission of
Yeah.
council, so. Okay, Andrew?
Does the APC have access to get this information?
Pete can speak to that, but he works with him, so.
Yes, when this originally came from council, I touched base with David Mitchell, who's the chair of the APC. And their initial step was for all of the members to go out into either Civic Info or just Google Lands and pick out like-sized community business license bylaws that they like.
Okay. Okay, so they've got access to it.
Yeah.
And they have staff support needed for themselves.
And the purpose of this is just to avoid them doing a lot of work where we go back and then they redo the work. And so,
Yeah.
So we acknowledge once they come back with something that we're. And move on.
I had a question that could just be my ignorance, but under number 5, transfer of license 3, A license granted under this bylaw shall be deemed a personal license to the licensee and shall not be transferable to any other person. What does that mean?
Means if somebody sells their business.
So when,
This is about a
when,
person.
when IGA number 44 that was
What
owned
page are
by,
you on?
sorry, 12, was owned by Bill and Louise Hawkins, they had a business license to operate the IGA number 44. When corporate took it over, HY Louis had to come and apply for a new business license. But why does it say personal? Like, doesn't that seem kind of odd? Because like, it wasn't Bill and Louise Hawkins, they had a company that would have applied for that business license. It would never have been, like, Shelley Downey doesn't own the drugstore, there's
Corporations
probably.
are deemed a person.
Is it?
So that might
Okay,
be why
that's why
we just
that's
did
why I'm
that.
asking, yeah, because it just, it stood out as odd.
That might be why.
Yeah, I think that's why there's.
And then a person shall not carry out or continue an unincorporated business which he has purchased without first obtaining a license pursuant to this bylaw.
So it's referencing sole proprietor businesses.
So if you bought, well, you can't buy a sole proprietor, but if you bought an LTD,
You're buying their goodwill. But that's what that is, if you're buying, maybe their bricks and mortar, and, you know, you can operate as a sole proprietor, not everybody will incorporate. That's how I read that.
and incorporated includes incorporate Inc. and LTD?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, it's just my ignorance. But yeah, I would totally agree with what Derek's asking them.
Great, so we don't need to mention that, we just, that's just information.
Did you, everything that you wanted, that
In
email?
sets, I think Gabby's point of short, prorated or short term.
And I've got that written.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say, send that to you.
And Gabby, you will email your bullets to staff? Yep. Okay. So moving on, we have the Island Coast Economic Trust Small Capital Restart Program. Anybody like to speak to this?
Well, I gave my elevator pitch last time. I been through the application and sort of quasi filled it out. I think that's all the really requirements they have. I don't know if you guys bounced off a few people, but got some good response. Interestingly enough, I got a letter from one of my multinational tenants asking for 3 parking spots out front, because this is the new norm for waiting in line, etc. So this fits in nicely with something like that. That's what the corporations are seeing, is outdoor waiting inside of stores and retailing outside. So it's just about that letter yesterday. I thought that was interesting.
What was the letter again?
I'm a landlord, so
Yeah.
requesting from me the permission to use 3 parking spots in front of the premises for queuing up people, sales, that kind of thing. And of course, as a landlord, I would refer back to parking bylaw and ensure I have enough spots based on the amount of retail I have, which I've done in the past, so I'm not.
And so then
too worried.
your idea would be suggesting then that we go to this business and say, we have tents that you can use.
Sure, this would be another example of, hey, these are available for you to try out, maybe, and then maybe they'll purchase them, if it's a long-term thing, continue renting them for a normal fee. I think the town has the capacity to do it. We can charge $10 per tent, and that could go right into the coffers if we're worried about staff time. The system's already set up for people renting out facilities and stuff like that, and charging people already.
Where does the other 50% come from?
That comes from us somehow. I asked CFO to maybe look into some options for that. But to me, I think there's money left in our grant aid budget. I don't know.
I make a comment, yeah. I like the idea, and I brought it forward, wanting to hear everybody's ideas. I guess my concern is
when you read through it, it's time sensitive and shovel ready. And we really don't have anything that's shovel ready. What we're doing is we're pulling something and crafting it to be shovel ready. And I understand we're at COVID, but then with the knowledge that we have to come up with another 15,000. So, you know, do we want to do that, or do we want to take this is just what I would throw out to council, or do we want to take the 25,000 that we have for recreation and say, no, we'd rather not put 15,000 to this, we'd rather take that and put it towards a recreation project. You know what I mean? Like when something that's already on our radar, or is there something that's on our radar that could fit for this? That's just a question I have. I'm not saying yea or nay.
And we don't have to spend the full amount either, depending on the funds are available. My point is, like, what has council done to help business other than, hey, here's the link to this program, the federal government, whatever, but this is something tangible we could do, and if it's a flop, we got a bunch of tents for community events, and we can put it out to more community groups, but I think the focus really should be business at this point. I would hope someone take advantage of it.
Can you explain to me how a business would benefit from?
Sure, say a restaurant would like to move to serving outside or already has a patio. That's a big responsibility on a day like today or a chance. It's going to rain. You're all set up for going outside. These tents have sides and a roof. So then that would give the business some predictability on the weather. They could try out a model of retailing or selling outside. Are they going to jump and do that and buy tents at $1,500 on a whim? Is this going to work or not? So this gives them a chance to experiment with outdoor retailing and selling. Lots of stores now have a maximum amount of people. And there's 4 people maximum. Well, how are you supposed to have a clearance sale, or how are you supposed to do some of those traditional big events and sales when you only have 4 people in your store? Let's say that the hockey tournament's back in town, but we're still kind of worried about COVID. Well, maybe the local retailer wants to have, instead of people lined up over from the Subway, he's got cold cut sandwiches in the tent ready to go for the kids who just want to have cheese sandwiches. You know what I mean? Like, I think we need to sort of give them business tools and hope that they can take advantage of this. Maybe as a grand opening for some of the new businesses that are starting. There's a couple. They can take advantage of that. Farmers market, for example, not everyone owns a tent, so there's an opportunity again for something cheap, affordable. Frankly, I don't see the biggest sort of negative to this would be public works time. Where do we put them? Blah, blah, blah. But if it's helping business and they're getting used, if they're not getting used, then it's not going to be huge public works or office nightmare. But if they are getting used, then that means we're helping local business. Again, the idea being, if this is the new way moving forward, then those businesses will make the decision on to create their own shelters or not. And I might add, on a rainy summer day, if we had a couple tents put up on our waterfront over a picnic table, like there's nowhere to get out of the rain. Mm-hmm. We're about to remove the only shelter we have, which is the hut going down to the dock. And so where do you get out of the rain?
Where do you go to the sun when the sun hits? Hello.
Sure. So we were in a rainy climate.
In that program summary, it says other sectors such as culture, performance, and events may not be able to reopen in the short term. Like, I know Logger Sports, we were talking about seeing if the Lions Club wanted to buy a second tent, and we would pitch in with the same as we bought the bleachers. As long as we got the bleachers on our Logger Sports weekend, then we'll give half the money kind of thing, or whatever, right? And I mean, there are weddings, there are funerals, there's the business end of it, but then you could also see, but then I just don't know, is it the town that should be doing that, or should it be, but then I mean, like the Lions Club is, they're having a hard time keeping their people together, and like, where do you start and where do you stop? Like, when we were talking about the sizes, you know, do you just get a couple of 10 by 10s, or do you go for a 10 by 20? Like, setting something up down on the waterfront that would then stay there. Like, I mean, I think it's great to have a little bit of shade, or like you say, get under from the sprinkles of the rain. And then if it doesn't work, is it a bad? It's like, can we then sell the? Is it a bad thing? But what are we actually committing to spending? Because $15,000 on tents from us and 15 from them would be 30. That seems like really excessive. But if you think about 1,500 for a 10 by 10.
Base 10, 1,400, it's probably more like 1,800 with the weights, the sides, all that.
So why a 10 by 10? How do you, if you're 6 feet apart, you've got one in each corner, that doesn't really work.
10
You're
by
gonna have to go
10
bigger.
defines the space, so you could have your family unit in that 10 by 10. If we have big giant tents, well, that's not really encouraging social distancing. So you've got a tent here, and then tents 6 feet or whatever. So it would really define social distancing. Which is, I think, well, that is the smallest tent that's sort of commercially available. You can't go bigger, but that's not saying the right message. Hey, everyone gather around a big tent in this day and age. But that could be something, you know, if this generates revenue that could go towards the maintenance, which I expect very, very little, because these are like super high quality tents, but eventually that's going to get that. So that fee could go towards that, or like I said, you just put it in the coffers and consider the staff time that's going to be needed. But yeah, I'm interested to know if we do have any funds available in the current budget, and then maybe adjust the
I'm
numbers.
struggling with supporting purchasing of 10 by 10 tents. Because right now, if a business if that's what they wanted, they can go order one from Canadian Tire, and they can put them up all over their parking lot as it is, right? You know, those are easier to access. Yes, they're not industrial grade, but they are cheap enough to be able to test their theory and the marketing. You know, when you said tents, I was thinking the size of tents that we have to borrow from, either rent from Down Island, or I think that Alliance in Port Hardy has. They're massive tents, but they're places where somebody could gather under, and, you know, in terms of distancing, you could have tables around the perimeter, and then you've got your distancing. But to me, they seem far more functional, and I could see where that would be a draw for weddings where it's too sunny or too rainy. You know, have your pop-up business under there. A restaurant could have a banquet for a family or whatever. So I'm struggling with a 10 by 10 inventory of commercial tents.
See, I'm thinking the big tents are not really going to fit the intent of this program, where it's COVID related. It's clearly focused on more businesses, not buddies who kind of barbecue in his backyard. Now, it may go that way if there's no uptake from the business and community group. But to me, we business offered first, get us through this summer, like all our tourism businesses. And it's a tough time right now. I think the rationale is there.
So Shirley, I was just on Island Coast Trust site. So for example, the town of Ladysmith, and tourism, many locals and visitors staying at home, has developed a multi-pronged initiative to attract visitors using the historic downtown's amenities. So what they're doing is development of permanent eating and gathering areas to add vibrancy to the downtown area. Also provide additional outdoor dining capacity to help food services. With Defino, they're doing something similar, an open air summer food court setup. And so, yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of we're having next Tuesday, somebody coming with an idea for a park down there. You know, maybe on Tuesday we might see the ability to be able to layer a park, which we approved a number of years ago with. Okay, Roger Brooks had this massive thing which could never go right in front of the visitor center because it's a working harbor, but could a smaller gazebo or something be done to layer into the park that's coming, that's drawing people down, that will help with tourism, you know, moving forward because it creates vibrancy at the waterfront. I don't know, just some thoughts that I had with that particular proposal coming to us on Tuesday. I agree.
The timeline on that is very long. I like the timeline, it looks reasonable, like next year's, we need something now, I think.
Right.
And this would be all of a sudden a great way to test the waters, where people are congregating in the water. Like, I did notice that proposal, that they don't really say where they're thinking the playground's gonna go.
Okay.
And was it appropriate to ask the CFO or some input on funding for a grant like this?
Well, I think we certainly, we have some additional funds we put into surplus that we could take out this year that could cover this. If, we also received that $10,000 back on one of the projects that, you know, it's not which went into general surplus. So the funds are there, it's up to council on how much you want to spend.
So one other comment I have, because when I read this, I was thinking, the one sector, because when I read it, it doesn't have to be COVID related. What it is because of COVID, we're looking for opportunities to do things a bit different now. And the one sector that is still being impacted here in this region is tourism and restaurants. Those are the two that have not, they took the brunt of it during the strike, and they're still in the brunt of it because of COVID. And so your tent idea fits for that, those two segments, for restaurants and tourism, gathering, food service. So
Retail as well.
to a degree, but that's this year's is really if you're gonna put this proposal together, that's the presentation, that's the rationale why we would want some cash. I disagree with your 10 by 10 tents. If we're gonna do tents, it has to be a mix of tents. It can't just be, it's gotta be mixed, because we're in COVID now, we won't be in COVID forever. And so we may want a 20 by 20 tent or a 40 by 40 tent, or, you know, we gotta think about beyond, especially if we're gonna put in, you know, spend $30,000 of taxpayers' money, right? So it can't be just a 6-month window we're thinking of. So, but I do wonder, I mean, do we set this aside, hear this group next week, and then come back and come with this? I don't know that park would meet this criteria.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not saying the park would.
That's
Just
long-term.
thinking of what could layer into a park that we could do quickly.
Anything bigger than the 10 by 10, then you're looking at multiple people to handle it, so that was a consideration as well. Like even the 10 by 10 tents are like 80, 90 pounds, right? So it's also see people are gonna move them, or some of the bigger tents. I mean, I'd be open to, you know, a different mix, or maybe we're 5,000 out of the budget, we're getting 4,000. 5 tents, you know, but this is a good opportunity. It's a tough grant to meet all these, you know, like I challenge anyone to come up with some other idea. So I don't, and it's like first come first serve, it kind of sounds like, and it's something we can turn around in like 3-4 weeks probably. So I guess this would have to go to council meeting anyways, correct? As opposed to maybe the whole to decide.
Yeah,
So yeah.
so we can just receive this for information.
Perhaps a preliminary report on some of the costs. I mean,
We really were
Staff.
thinking the rental times will be during summer, right?
yeah, well, or
Like-
the shoulder seasons, we want to build our
Yeah.
business in the shoulder seasons.
So typically we get the summer kids starting in May. They go till the end of August. That's gonna be probably the predominant up, down, up, down, up, down. Maybe somebody would put one up in April and leave it for a period of time. I mean, I think we would have the bodies to put them up.
I think we some pretty simple policies. The tents are public works yard, you're only picking up between 9 and 10 a.m. You know, at the end of the day, or they're in this shed here, a
Is there
couple
any-
here.
Is there any liability insurance that we would have to be worried about?
It blows away. I know, I'm thinking of a lot of things, staff staff time to, you know, do we take a deposit, you know, all these different things that have to, it's not, you know, the tenants is just one layer.
Full confidence in our staff that come up with this.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what any risks are that are associated with doing it. And I'd be interested to see, your thoughts, if we went 5,000 and it was matched to 5,000, what would be your mix that you would think for 5? What would be your mix for 75? What would be your mix for 10? You've done the research, you've seen the sizes, because I do agree with Shelley. I mean, hopefully this COVID isn't going to be forever. And there are occasions where you could use that bigger tent.
It could easily be put together, so let's say
Yeah.
you've got a 20 by 20, right? Versus.
The only thing is, if we want a staff report and our agenda goes out Thursday, this is probably not gonna be on this agenda, it'll be on the next agenda if you want to request staff report, because they're, you know.
We'll
state
get on the
action.
agenda, I'll just make a motion that we apply for it. Council's not into it, that's fine, if they want to change that to a report. So, yeah. I just think
Is
it's
there-
easier to do nothing, for sure. It's gonna
Is there a quick
stop.
insurance purview? Like, do we have an insurance person that you could call and say, hey, if we start renting commercial sized tents, is there any?
We're already renting out so much stuff. Community hall, you're taking deposits on keys and this and that, so.
Well, I'm not worried about this, the staff time end of it. I'm not
We
worried
say
about
we're
that at all.
already renting stuff out.
But they're fixed things,
We're
right?
renting out
That's all I'm
equipment for
asking.
Public Works, you know, there's some stuff like that that happens, that we already do, so.
I would think it'd be more along the lines of, we're looking at campground right now, we're in that they sign a waiver.
Okay,
You
yeah,
know, I would
can
say,
do
I
that.
mean, it would probably fall under our general liability,
okay.
but, I would think it'd be more into that. they
In your
would
rental
have to-
agreement.
They would have to sign a rental agreement waiver that, because when you talk about the other, things that we rent out, they have to supply us with the general, or name us as general liability. So I've seen that where groups have asked to close down a street maybe, and they have to, along with their application, they have to show that they have liability insurance and that we are named on that for that day for that event. Right? So that's the kind of idea I would think we'd be most likely looking at. Was renting the tents out. And you'd probably be more inclined to find out from another person that does that, because there are companies that do rent out, you know, in the cities.
Right, and I do an app, we're not stepping on any businesses' toes here.
Yeah.
That's it.
The Lions Club just has the one, and there are times where things happen in Port McNeil, nothing happens for 6 weeks, and then everybody does it all on the same day, and everybody wants the tent, right?
I'm thinking of the companies that will, like the big tents, you know, rent them out. We have some.
This is all too fancy for me.
Or we can call it pop-up for me.
There you go.
Pop-up,
There you
pop-up, or some horrible.
There you go.
Okay, well, so that piece of that.
I'm just gonna jump in and just share something, just because we're talking about opportunities in business here. I had a call from Jay Dixon. He was in a meeting, discussion came around, Fort McNeil, electric vehicles. BC Hydro contacted him right away and said, we're doing promotions on staycations, and we'd like to feature Fort McNeil because you have your new fast charging station here. So he called me, Amy, I talked to Amy after, who's the media person handling this. So they want to come and do a story about our EV station right down here. And so, and the plus in all of that is there aren't, like I found, I think there's right now one vehicle in town that is in that category, that level 3 charging. We had Bill McCormick come and present to us about, level 2 and 3 and all of that, right? So, if I don't know if he's upgraded his vehicle, but the reality is that charging station isn't really for our benefit as locals, it's for drawing people in. It gives people the ability to pop up the island, charge their car, and come and explore. And so, we've got that as another kind of plug in our come and see us, come and use us to explore the region. Let us be your base camp, right?
And that's a much better spot for it.
It's a fantastic spot.
Fantastic
It
spot.
is.
That's what it should be in the first
Really
place.
is. Yeah, so I guess, Derek, if you want to write something up and throw it on the agenda, then I guess we'll have this discussion at our next council meeting. But also, I'm telling you it's about that because that that's another door that we haven't really, at the tourism committee level, we're talking about, you know, our focus is to be a base camp too. How do we do it? So we had a big discussion and we kind of came up with a tagline, and because it came from the fact that we have a brewery opening here in town. And there's the ale trail that is here on the island. And so we were thinking, okay, what does that look like? What have we got? My throat said, well, are we not Wales Trails and Ale? Could that be us? And so you've got, you know, we're looking at marketing pitches. So, you know, both of those things, whale watching and trails, that's very eco-friendly. Now we've got this level 3 charger. Like it's kind of opening up a door of opportunity for us into a market for locals and, you know, those who are more environmentally aware of their footprint to come into the area. So I'm throwing this out there just for food for thought as we consider Derek's proposal, and maybe that'll stir something up within the rest of us to, you know, what is there a better use for this iced tea money that could dovetail with and meet the needs of expanding our tourism and restaurants that would have a more lasting impact. So just going to leave that there, and if that's okay.
So I'm hearing then it's gonna go on the next agenda.
Well, sure. Is that
Oh, please, can I
Like-
request that, and I'll send out this application that I have filled out.
okay? Last on the list here is museum operations. So, Kate, would you like to, or who would like to speak to that? Because it got placed on here.
I can start. Last week, I got an emergency.
So is this all public or is this something that we should be going in camera to talk about? Just a question.
I think at this point it'd be public.
Okay, great.
I don't see any reason to
Okay,
go in
Just
camera.
wanted to clarify.
Our last year's museum curator announced that the doors were going to be open July 2nd or July 1st. Now, in my absence, thankfully, our public works manager had the forethought to say, do you have your safe work procedures in place for opening during COVID? Do you have your PPE? Do you have everything that you need to do this safely? And he asked that question to the Museum Society, who had no notice that this was happening. So the museum curator, without having direction from the society or from the town, moved forward with this opening. So again, thankfully, our public works manager had the forethought to go, well, we need to have this discussion at a council level before we can open, for liability, for safety. And as I was talking to him, I said, well, we also need to make the decision, is the curator now going to become an employee of the town of Port McNeill? Are we entering into a contract with them? Are we taking over the museum? Are we looking at another society to take over the museum? There's so many unanswered questions that I thought that maybe the whole meeting would be a good place to start that discussion and see where we move forward from here.
Except we still don't have a letter from the Museum Society relinquishing or dissolving. So we
Correct.
have that,
Correct.
which we really need, do we not, before we can move forward, or do we just move forward in spite of it?
Are they a society?
They were, it is no longer, societal status was removed earlier this year.
How was it?
Was it removed, or did they fail to file their annual reports?
Yeah. Failed
Failed
to
to
file.
file.
That's some things on the museum.
Sure.
Although we're gonna sort of rush into this, and the decision to gut or fully change the face of the museum is gonna be left up to an individual or a group of students or something. And I really see this as being tied to our OCP, so, you know, that's a good building, you know, maybe we're tearing down the old school and we need to utilize that building for something more than a museum, or maybe no museum at all, because there's a meeting rooms upstairs. So I'm really sort of on the fence of rushing into something that maybe status quo is fine, but even with COVID, I think that's a bit of a risk. I really think we need to hash it out for our community. It's part of the big picture of our buildings.
I think what I understood, and was, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Emery, but it wasn't to go in and cut, I think it was to get a younger person's viewpoint. To, maybe go through the museum, have some ideas to bring to the table to how can we freshen that and make it more relevant moving forward in the future. I don't think it was to, I might have inadvertently said the wrong phrase at a meeting once, but I think that was never my understanding. I don't know. I think it was just, it was a way to employ a young person, how that the open, I think status quo was said, for this one, or young person or people, that person, the curator currently, or the person who's currently working there, will have to have a discussion with that as well. And then just moving forward, what could the possibilities be? Right.
What I have written down is museum goals: engagement, revenue use of the building, and participation. Under engagement, I think we need to have a plan and a vision. I think there needs to be an electronic component. We have people that are actually saying they would come forward and volunteer, so I don't know, maybe, like you're saying, a different society. Paid support, tying it into the visitor center, exhibits in hotels. Now for me, just having been in there the first time, since it's had stuff in it, that the blueprints for the Dale are hanging on the wall in the temperature controlled area, which nobody goes into. Well, if we had that and we said to Jamie, put it there, there's your pamphlets. I know apparently in the past there was discussions about actually taking some of the memorabilia and putting it into locations around town so that people could see it. And that apparently went kind of the way of the dodo bird. It never was something that was followed through on. So even with COVID and the place being closed, if you had somebody go in and say, okay, what are these pieces of rigging that look really wild? And Jordan had agreed to put it in front of IGA, and you said Port McNeill Museum, and you had these rigging pieces just to get people asking questions. And from a tourism standpoint, and I'm picking on rigging because pick all the bottles. I mean, there's a gajillion and a half bottles. I've under revenue, I've got sales of Port McNeill memorabilia, or like a gift shop, t-shirts, postcards, etc. I know, like from us at Locker Sports, if there's a store in town that had offered, if we had any extra hoodies, they say, if you order extra hoodies, we'll sell them here for you. That would go back to our Lager Sports Society, but it also gets people going into that store. Well, that would be a perfect opportunity of a place where you could have some of those sales, not to be taken away from the other stores in town. Rental of the boardroom space, artist in sitting. I mean, actually, I'll give all the credit to Julian. You've got this beautiful building. Well, maybe let's just pick on Kathy Harder. Kathy Harder wants to work out some sort of a deal, and she gets to have that display area for 2 weeks. She rents it for. Maybe we just take a commission on what she sells, and then you have people in the building. You have air circulating. It's not stuffed up. It's getting people into that building. They might come to look at Kathy's stuff, and then they wander over and they see this and that. Participation. I'm thinking that whether it's a volunteer group or it's this paid student that's there, approaching the groups, the families, the fire department, the BC ambulance, the RCMP. I mean, there was a lady here that came up camp this weekend from Alberta. So it was her sister's 60th birthday. She nursed in our hospital in 1986. She hasn't been back. She was actually from Dallas from 4:30. She drove into town with her husband and went, "There's nothing. Where's the hospital?" Because none of that had been developed when she was last here, right? The hospital was there, but none of the housing had been there. So, I mean, it's just, you've got to have buy-in, you've got to have give. You want to go and you want to see your legacy, you want to see your family's legacy. And that to me is lacking in the museum. There's artifacts, but there's no personalization. So that to me is where, and I think that the layout, the way that things were, I was only there for 20 minutes, but the layout, maybe we could pack up all the farming stuff and only have the logging stuff out for these 2 months, and then we pack up the logging stuff and we bring out the farming stuff so that you could have an area over here where you actually have photographs, where you have a computer screen where you can put sticks in because somebody has gone to these groups and said, okay, Girl Guides of Canada, what do you got? And you get people from all over the world in it. You would start to send your pictures in and we tag them and name them and then you're getting that buy-in. People will want to go. I mean, go in this and say, hey, you got any old animals kicking around? Bring them down here. Let's go on. I don't know, just some sort of.
So while you're talking, and back to that Phase C thing, Shemaine is finding a way to do their stuff virtually, so maybe that could be something that we can, how do we get our museum virtually so people can visit it, which creates the incentive to come and visit when it's open. And there's lots, the Discovery Center down in Hamburg have done, there's lots of templates that easily somebody could do. Student, you know, we could hire a student, they could do the research, they could say this, this, and this is what we need to do, this is the cost.
My last part was plans and vision, buy-in, catalog of service groups, photographs, capital letters, electronic filing, personalization of the exhibits. Have a sports hall of fame, have an academic hall of fame. I mean, we have F-18 pilots that went to school here. We have, I mean, Sylvia or Kathy Eggenberger did the rowing, right? It's not just, God bless them, William and Clayton, you know, Erica Manders, doctorate in, you know, like we have people that have come out of this town that are pretty darn exciting and they're, you know, and that's part of our give is you come in and it's warm and you know, you think back to when Emily Johnson got diagnosed with cancer at 6 weeks old, and Craig Dimitrichuk did muffins, probably before your time, did muffin for a muffin. He used to make these muffins like this. And they were like $1.50, and every dollar that went from that went towards Emily and cancer treatment and looking after that family. That's part of what makes our community, like sending a letter to Sharkey and Baldine for their 50th wedding anniversary. The new baby, you know, like that sort of stuff. That's the community. That's what keeps things going and keeps people or gets people to want to come here because they get that vibe. I have a new CFO and he's already saying how friendly everything is. Can't get over it. It's come from Edmonton. You know, it's, you go into the stores, people say hi, they smile at you. You're walking down the street, people are waving. That's what, so how do we tie that in? And I was probably the one to say, get it, but my thought was more organizing because I think that the way that it is, it's, you have all this stuff. So
I
maybe
think we all agree it needs work, so what's our next step?
what's the next step? And if I mean, James has said that they're done, he'll get the letter to us. Okay, well, we've heard that now a couple times. What do we do?
I can draft a letter and basically just go and get his signature.
Signature.
That sounds good.
That
sounds great.
And then, I mean, we didn't get all the student funding that we wanted. I don't know how our people are working out. I don't know.
Chair. Kennedy Lasota actually in university has a drive towards history. When I mentioned that there may be an opportunity for some assistance at the museum, I've never seen anyone as excited about a museum except for you. There's a great resource there is to actually get a young body that has a drive to do something like that.
Ellie Chester has put her name forward and said she'd like to come and help out. What's my application? And I'm going like, I mean, Ellie would be a wonderful person to get in there and, you know, kind of one of these and reasonable and rational. And I think we could have something good going here that would be an advantage to us down the road and gives us that bit of anchor.
So Henry, you gave us quite a bit of your thoughts. It's obvious that you have given it a lot of thought and you articulated it really well. Can you prepare something and distribute it to us? I started taking notes and then I just started listening instead. But you
Just along the lines of,
your give it crap is very high for the museum, and I liked a lot of the things that you suggested. But you know, we need a museum champion, and we need people to gather around, and we need to have that. You know, we need to pull everybody in, and then state what is the goal and objective. Where are we going? You know, do we have the rotating displays? You gave a whole lot of information there. And maybe it can all come, but you know, how does it stagger, you know, phase 1, 2, 3, what does that look like? But if you were able to put your words on paper, maybe we could have that as a next step in the conversation. And then also speaking to the volunteers, they also would have a sense of the direction that it's going as well.
Well, and my understanding is kind of that the group, they're non-existent. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's, even after they sign it over, their group is done and the town takes it over, could we still not have like a volunteer group, just with direction?
Why not?
I think we need to encourage a new society to form and then let,
Or we could start with museum
or
committee
committee,
and
just
then
like our other
possibly
things.
morph into a society.
More for society.
I mean, I'd be more concerned we're not doing a recreation committee before a museum all of a sudden committee. That's just my opinion, but.
Recreation.
But I guess the question is, are we opening it this year or in short time status quo or not? I'm inclined to just say it's close to the year. We're not going to get tourists coming through and we don't seem to have a good
We have
city
3
plan.
minutes. I'm just going to bring everybody to a close here. We've got 3 minutes. So what is the consensus with the museum? Do we open it? Do we operate with, I see a few options. We keep it closed all year. We run with, you know, status quo, the line by budget for the museum and the group or whoever it is, or we take our students and we allocate them over there and have some open hours with restrictions and then give them tasks to do while they're in the museum.
Yeah, so the fourth option is get the society up and running, and maybe by the end of the summer, we reallocate some staff. But I'm not sort of into the students just going in and doing sort of work, like a make work project. We should work on trails or a whole bunch of other things, but if the direction from the society is organized and everything, then I would support that. But until then, I say just keep it close.
Well, I like the idea of employing a young person, especially if they have a history background. I don't think it's going to be wasted, even if we don't open, but allow them to put some thoughts and ideas to it, and that can, you know, be put into the mix of, because that young person, those young people are going to be gone. And then now we're back to, I'm not saying other people won't have a fresh vision, but I just want to know what a young person would think, what would make it relevant that they would actually want to take part in something like that. That's my thought. So I would be for hiring somebody, maybe keeping it close, but having them go in and inventory and give suggestions and that kind of thing. I mean, inventorying is a great place to start. We don't even know what's in there. Really fully.
So my thought is I would like to see a student in there for, say, 4 hours a day, doing the inventory, but do have the museum open for the people who do stumble into the community and want to go and see what we have. I don't have a problem with that, but it would be with restrictions and limitations. So,
Like our funding for students just went 100% down too, so I have no idea.
we
You have a
did
person
Saturday.
upstairs, you know, where it's,
But-
how's that gonna affect the office
But
staff?
they can be volunteering 4 hours a week, and then you qualify for that new funding, because it's, if a student volunteers, there's funding similar to serve for them, so it's a volunteer position that they're actually getting paid for. But I think they just redirected the.
No, we
You
haven't
can take
seen
advantage of that
how
funding.
it's
Yeah, I don't know how it's operating yet.
Yeah. Anne Marie? Anne Marie, did you have any comments on the museum?
I think I will put together something and bring it forward. I don't know, I wish like there was stats or something so that you could, you know, you could say, hey, typically this, I mean, I'm sure in August when we used to have Orca Fest, it would be, you know, you'd have people coming in and out, but Thursday's a hot day, or, you know, like, without having that, it's kind of hard to say. And then it's the cleanliness too. I just don't know with COVID and.
So you're, so we've got a few options.
Yeah.
Keep the doors closed, no student, keep the door closed, send a student into inventory, student, and some open hours.
I'd be leaning towards the middle one, and I think
Student, inventory,
doors locked.
And
Okay.
And
Society part.
starting to get a vision and a
And then that
drive
would be going on in the
in
background.
the background.
I think,
Yeah.
but I'm in society that should be on its way for some students. Granted, with this grant thing, Walter can accept, but it should be on the agenda really, I guess.
So we're just
for
having
our
a
decision.
conversation today about it, and I don't know what your agenda.
So we can
You've
put
got
it
that
on the
set?
agenda, yeah, and then we can.
And a little background report, maybe, like just to review the members involved,
Sure.
and then visitor stats if they're available. I think in the past they have been, and I always noted.
Yeah, I think that's the
no,
book
but-
that they sign in, that was basically what was done. It was very casual. I don't know, you're gonna get that.
For Thursday, that might be a tough ask, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, or a statement from the person who ran it last year, or some sort of idea, because I don't think many people went there.
Okay, it's 12:02. We have a question. I can't read that from here. Can you read it out loud?
Bill would just like to know if somebody could message him with our decision on whether or not we'll be opening the museum. And if so, what the days and hours of operation will be, and which he's already gone, he was having trouble hearing as well. So I can just respond to him that it'll be on the Tuesday agenda.
Okay.
There's another question, isn't
If you plan on applying for a small capital restart program, could you let me know who on council would be best to talk to for details on the application? It'll be same thing, going back to.
And I would say staff. We speak to that.
And going back to the Tuesday meeting.
Okay.
There's more.
Yeah, given the recent Bear Aware Award to Port Hardy and your discussions last year about monitoring their weekly garbage pickup trial during last year's beer season, do you feel Port Hardy system is workable here? And if so, do you plan a test of weekly garbage pickup this year?
We haven't discussed it yet.
There's nothing planned, it's fair to say.
Nothing planned
Yeah.
at the moment, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, beer or garbage cans are fantastic.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Which was the point, right? If there's nothing else, then can I get a motion to adjourn? I'll move through. Good discussion, you guys.
Yeah.
The new water truck has arrived.
Yeah, so much.
It looks like a transformer.
It looks like,
The new water truck.
A
pumper truck, the pumper truck.
It's a water truck?